Okay, good evening, everybody. Okay. Hello. My name's Stephen Ford. I'm the manager of engagement, if I don't know you already, with the Allied Arts Council of Lethbridge. And what we're doing here tonight, as many of you are probably aware, is one of our artwork sessions, which is a professional development series that we do once a month. Generally, the last Thursday of the month, we're doing them at 7 o'clock. But before we do any of talking about any of that, I think it's important that we start off with a land acknowledgement. Of course, just paying respect to the Blackfoot people, Treaty 7, and acknowledging their traditions and relationship to the land. I say that, but those are just words, and something that I always kind of like to bring up when we do these land acknowledgements is that we could probably do a little bit better, and even part of that is to admit when, on a personal level, we could do better. For me, for instance, I sometimes struggle with like speaking the Blackfoot words and whatnot. So I think an important thing to do with these land acknowledgements is like talk about how we can do a little bit better. And I have something for you. So actually, right now, as we speak at the Galt Museum, and they're doing this every Thursday until the end of June, they're doing Blackfoot classes. Blackfoot language classes. So they run from start at about 5:30 and goes until about 8 o'clock. They provide supper. I'm going to make a point to go to one of those. And if you're like me and maybe struggle with like speaking the words and doing that, that's just something we can do beyond just saying these words. Because if the words aren't backed up by action, then what what are we doing here, right? So I'll leave that at that for now. So yeah, we're artwork. This is a professional development series, like I was saying. It's just trying to make you a little bit better in your craft than you were the day before. So we invite primarily local people who've had some success and talk about just kind of their story or how we can help you get a little bit better within your craft. For instance, we've obviously got our panelist Gillian, who I'll get to in a moment here. In June, we actually have Osei Iret from CBC News. He's going to be doing a piece on visual storytelling in the sort of film documentary kind of medium. So we're going to be doing that next month. Going forward too, we have Liz Lepper is going to be doing a session on artists promoting themselves, social media, that kind of stuff that sometimes as artists we're not always the best at doing. Down the line, we're hoping to do a session on AI, which I'm really excited about. So we're working on putting something together for that going forward. And then also in the fall, we're going to be doing something with access copyright. That'll be really cool. So stay tuned. Best way to stay informed in all this stuff is to become a member of the Allied Arts Council. Super simple to do. Go to artslethbridge.org if you haven't yet already. There's a form on there. You click, you fill it out, and the best part, it's free. And then you'll always kind of know what's going on in our world of trying to enhance and advance the arts here in Lethbridge. Also, these artwork sessions going forward too, on that artslethbridge.org website, we have an area in there called resources, little tab drop down, and you can find the most recent artwork sessions. So these kind of live there. And of course, on YouTube, we have all of them going back years and years. So it's a tremendous resource for artists. I definitely recommend you like and subscribe our channel on YouTube, and you can get access to a whole bunch of not just artwork sessions, a lot of stuff with what's going on in the Allied Arts Council world. Okay, without any further ado, I'm going to get to the reason that you're all here and watching this. Gillian Goerz. So Gillian is a very, very talented author, graphic novelist, best-selling, and she's going to talk a little bit about taking that from an idea through the process. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and everyone please snap your fingers, jazz hands, for Gillian Goerz.
Thanks, Steve. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. I am going to share my screen here, so forgive like 1 to 30 seconds of farting around. Okay. Starting going. All right. Then I'm going to do this. Then I'm going to do this. Oh, and I'm going to actually put it at the beginning. Okay, I think I'm where I want to be right now. Oh, let's get that going. There we go. Okay, so hi, my name is Gillian Goerz, and this is my chat. So I'm working kind of on two screens here, so forgive me if I'm a little less than savvy. So I am the author and illustrator of Shirley and Jamila Save Their Summer and Shirley and Jamila's Big Fall. Two graphic novels. I wrote them, I illustrated them. They took a long time. So I have been doing a little bit about me. I've been working and drawing and making, like, I've been drawing as a person since I was this age and this age and this age. Now, I often present to kids and I always tell them that you don't have to have been drawing since you were 2.5 in order to make a graphic novel or in order to work creatively. I'm going to touch on comics because that's a large portion of what I do, but hopefully that this will apply to anybody in any kind of creative field. If you're a writer, an artist, and anybody making things in a creative way, because a lot of the same blocks and issues confront all of us, right? Regardless of what our medium might be. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my path to publication, because I know for a lot of people who might be interested in either making comics, making work, making books, writing. Um, oh, I see I'm sorry, I'm going to move it so I can't see the chat now because I will be distracted. Looks like somebody maybe can't see something, but hopefully, Steve, you're sorting that out. There will be a Q&A at the end of everything here. So if you do have questions and stuff comes up as I'm chatting, I'm going to try to not check the chat until the last 15 minutes, and then I'll take some time to answer any questions that might have come up. So jot them down, save them for that particular moment. Now, so we're going to talk about my path to publication from my initial idea to the final book. And I want to talk about also the highs and lows of working creatively because it ain't all roses. I'm also, of course, going to do a Q&A, as I just mentioned. So my path to publication. A book, I do like to do reading about creativity, and a book, it's not perfect, but it had a real nugget in it in Elizabeth Gilbert's book, Big Magic. She talks about how inspiration isn't like a lightning bolt that strikes you, but it's more like something sparkly in your peripheral vision that makes you turn your head to look. And then something else sparkly happens and you continue to turn to look. And the more you turn, the more your path is reoriented in a different direction than where you started. And it might not be where you even knew you were going, but the inspiration, so to speak, is guiding you. Now, that's very much how it was for me. Let's see here. So as discussed, you might remember this picture. I've been drawing for my whole life. The drawing part was always very natural. Forgive my voice, I'm getting over a summer cold here. I started drawing before I can even remember doing it. And magically, and very luckily for me, I never really stopped. That said, there was a period in my 20s where drawing moved into the margins of whatever I was officially doing. I went to art school fresh out of high school and quickly got disillusioned. The path from drawing and enjoying drawing to contemporary art just really held no interest for me personally, and it really shook my confidence on my own art path. I didn't want to be a conceptual artist, and when you take art in university, like that's what it is. It was just like, well, how are you going to be a painter and do all this contemporary didactic panel writing a statement stuff that just seemed outside of what I wanted to do. I ended up quitting university and I spent my 20s doing a ton of other things, like truly a litany of unrelated jobs. I worked in bookstores, clothing stores. I was an administrator. I did amateur acting for a while, marketing, newspaper sales. In every position, I found myself striving to bring my creativity to that job. And often to my great benefit, I managed to find pockets of greater success because I was always pushing the boundaries of whatever these jobs were because they weren't especially fulfilling. So, I mean, creativity can happen in any role that you're in. It doesn't have to be, nor does this talk have to be just for people who want to be an artist or a writer or whatever for your job. It can be like, how do I access more creativity in my day-to-day life? So finally, I decided to follow that initial urge towards making drawing my career. So I think I was 29 when I moved to Toronto, and instead of contemporary art, I studied illustration. So I moved to Toronto, I think in 2008, and by 2014, I was a full-time freelance illustrator. I had only then, in this image here, recently quit my job at a bike store to try and do it for real. And this is like one of the weird random gigs that started my career, and honestly still does, where I painted the windows of the Four Seasons Center where they hold all the big operas for a big gala event. And I did a big piece. And then on the night of the event, they had me dressed up, finishing the artwork so that, the fancy people could watch, which, that was really fun for me. It's not for everybody, but I liked it. So let's see here. Getting to making actually the work that I made. My whole path with these books, with the Shirley and Jamila story, was around this time in 2014. I was keeping a sketchbook, and the one day I drew this character, and I just knew who she was right away. And I realized that I wanted to keep writing for this character and just build out a story for her. Excuse me. Put that way, it sounds pretty easy, right? But at the same time, a ton of different simultaneous small steps were happening that were all the kind of light shoulder taps that eventually turned me in the direction of comics. So at that time, I'd been reading a lot of Sherlock Holmes, which I loved, but I was always taken out of the story by like the super intense racism and sexism of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and of like the Victorian age in general. And that's just baked into the stories. Also at that time, I met Mariko Tamaki through a friend, and she let me audit a comics making course that she was teaching at the U of T with Willow Dawson. After that course, she brought me on to illustrate some small pieces with her. These got me the publishing credits I needed to apply for grants, which is something that Mariko also really pushed me towards and really encouraged. Come on. Did it do the thing? No. There it did. All right. So I was living in Toronto, obviously, and there's a worthwhile note about living in a city. Living in a large center can be really critical for artists in terms of exposure and access to people who are making a living in the arts. It's not imperative, but it really does put you in the path of opportunity. And that was really useful for me because I also made friends with Ryan North and Emily Horn, who are prolific webcomic makers. Ryan still, Emily, I think, is retired from that, but like at the time they were doing weekly, daily comics that were getting like hundreds and thousands. Like they built a humongous audience just doing this very a la carte in their own way. And then they found this huge following. So around that time, I also started a webcomic. It doesn't exist anymore, but it was like a teen diary style in the vein of Linda Berry. And it gave me a chance to try my hand at being the author and the illustrator at the same time. Now, when I had the idea for Shirley, this kid-focused Sherlock Holmes retelling in Toronto, I had all of these pieces in place, or a lot of them. And this mentorship from Mariko, Brian, Emily all played a big part in just even feeling like I had the chops to be worthy of even trying. So on the heels of that, I started applying for grants. Again, I was encouraged by Mariko, and a bunch of the credits, of course, I got from our work together allowed me to do that. And she not only nudged me just saying like, hey, you should do this, but she sent me links and really did like amazing mentor work in that area. She really like laid it before me, and I took the step and then got some grants. And once you get validated financially, it's just so huge as a creator. I'd really encourage anybody out there to research the grants that you're eligible and apply for them. It's humongous just to have somebody from the outside say like, I'm giving you money because your idea is worth that. Like it's a bit of a bummer on a certain level that the financial validation makes such a difference, but this work takes a lot of time. And if you don't have like a little bit of rope in terms of finances to not be on death's door if you don't make it, it's just a huge, huge piece of the puzzle. So the finances matter. Money isn't happiness, but lack of it can be a hell. So if it represents freedom for you in the face of your creativity, you got to go for that. Well, you don't have to, but I did, and I was very grateful to have done so. Now, around this time, I also joined a private Facebook group for women and non-binary creators called The Binders. And when they posted about an affordable writing conference, I like impulsively decided to go. I didn't think of myself as a writer at all. I'd primarily done the art side of things, and these grants sort of felt like a little outside of my wheelhouse. But I was like, I'll go to this writing conference. I have this grant money. I have to finish this project now. So I want to talk for 2 seconds about conferences because conferences can be an amazing way to connect to other people who are doing what you want to do, or maybe what you're already doing. But making that sort of community and talking to other people that are doing that kind of work is so key in just like in the same way that living in the city was for me. It validates that this work exists. Like the movies, making movies felt insanely foreign to me until I lived in Toronto and it was like, oh, well, my friend's dad's a director or they're shooting a movie down the street. Suddenly, the reality of this as an industry becomes tactile. And same with conferences. It's a great way to be like, oh, I could be a writer, but writers don't really exist. And then you meet a room full of authors. Great stuff. So not every conference, though, is created equal. And the one that I went to was so amazing that I just want to touch on some of the reasons it was amazing, because that can be, A, if you're thinking of putting on a conference yourself, this is a beautiful guideline. Or if you're thinking of applying to conferences, it's a good thing. It's a bunch of good things to look for in terms of not getting roped into conferences that won't be value for money for you. Because, some of them are just simply are not amazing. I've heard from people who are like, well, that was a huge waste of time, or felt like it was a scam or whatever. And they're happening all over the world. And this one was in LA. So I like paid to fly to the States to do it. And here's a few reasons it was amazing. So first off, it was priced super accessibly, or it was free for people who had the need without a ton of humiliating groveling and debasement to like prove that you're poor. If you're going to give people who don't have means a discount, don't make them humiliate themselves to get it. Like just already it was just like dignity, check, you've got it. Even if you don't have stuff, we're going to let you in. If a few people abuse that, it's worth it, I think, for the people who won't feel completely debased by having to, send you their T4s or whatever and prove that they're on death's door. Like, show the poor some respect. It also put the most vulnerable in the path of the most opportunity. This workshop took anybody who was funded or like got sponsored to attend, they got moved into the VIP section. So any of the parties and things that had panelists at it who were famous people, like real like A-list writers, suddenly they're meeting the people who couldn't afford to pay the way to go. That's a smart way to do things. You're really connecting the most vulnerable with the most opportunity. Also, there was an opportunity at this conference to get to sit down and speed pitch with agents. So I got to take my whole grant application, put it in front of an agent, give them my spiel, and like get a yes or no from them. They were connecting the talent with the people who could make that talent happen. So, so good, so wonderful. The other great thing it did is they made a real effort to eliminate hierarchies with tone. So it opened with this lovely tone setting speech that everyone here deserves to be here and you belong here. Excuse me, which was really critical because some of the attendees were very established authors and like people of a lot of means. This was in LA, the other LA. And a bunch of people were like beginner, like, like I was in that category, like the beginner dirtbag, like just hanging out, trying to get what I could out of this. And by telling everyone in the room they're equal in terms of being there, they all belong, it really worked. This tone setting set the tone setting set the tone. And everybody really made a point of connecting to one another in this beautiful way. So anyway, all that to say, this was an incredible, incredible opportunity. And later, when I was full of, like, let me back up a second. At this conference, I really got inundated with inspiration. That was one of its primary amazing factors for me. So I got to see people doing this in the wild. I got to speed pitch the agents, so much positive feedback that when it came to crunch time, which I'm going to talk about a little more in a minute, it made it impossible to give in to the unbridled fear that comes when you dive into a creative project. Suddenly, when that fear came up, I had inadvertently preloaded my own mental arsenal with reasons not to bail on the project, not to believe in my own self-sabotaging voices, with reasons to just work harder and ask for help, which I now had like an arsenal of people that I knew were writers that I could reach out to and be like, this sucks right now. Super, super good. So great. And it wasn't my second BinderCon that I went to, which was the name of the conference, that I got offers from 3 different agents. So that was a pretty incredible opportunity for me. So I had Shirley, and then I got an agent. It was an incredible luxury and a source of huge anxiety to be able to choose from different agents. I landed on my agent here, Anjali Singh. She was with an agency at the time that just had a really great catalog of authors. They had a focus on social justice. And it just seemed like the work that they represented aligned with the tone that I wanted my work. So I'm very, very happy with this choice. They've been wonderful. The next thing that had to happen was my agent did her job, which was find me a publisher. I ended up getting signed with Dial Young Books, Books for Young Readers, which is a imprint of Penguin Random House in the US. And suddenly everything was opening up for me. So that's real easy, right? But now I had to make the books. And once again, that is where the fear came in. So when it came to making the book, I want to talk about something that comes up for all creative work, which is the fear. Come on, there we go. A few things, here's a fun daily list of my like often more than daily fears. Things that I would say to myself. I'm obviously going to screw this up. I'm going to do it, but it'll be bad. And everybody's going to think I'm a joke, especially people that I admire, as well as my friends. Also, maybe it'll be bad, but no one even sees it at all, which might be worse. Or it'll be so bad that it actually ruins my career. Another possibility is, who do I think I am? I've never done this before. A lot of really fun things to think about. Thankfully, to counter the fear, I had a few things in place. Trusted creative friends. Having pals, and again, this is where conferences can be really useful, or like a local writing group, a whatever. I don't care where you get it, but creating a cabal of pals that do similar work, understand the creative life. You don't want to go to like your coworker at an office job. I remember, side story, God, I got to keep this short. Side story, I had a job before I decided to move to Toronto and like pursue creativity full time. And I said I was going to do that. And I had one of my coworkers be like, that's a dumb move. Just make it your hobby and go be a dental hygienist. Which, like, financially, yeah, that's probably was pretty good advice. But this is why you don't show your first draft to your coworkers. This is why you want trusted creative friends who understand how to give critique about something, who know enough to relate and not try to give you too much advice. You want people who mostly just listen and might offer some real life examples of their own on why my fears might be unfounded. People who are going to be like, you've made a million comics, just push through this, or gee, that sucks. I'm listening. You don't want somebody being like, well, you're right, this isn't that good. Go and be a dental hygienist. That's not useful. Another thing that helps counter the fear is experience. I had my own work. I had made comics that I liked that I could refer to. I have done this before, and I can continue to do it. Mentors, as discussed, Mariko, Ryan, Emily, a million other people that I stacked up over the years. My publisher, my agent, they all had put a stake in me. And even if I didn't believe in myself in that moment, they believed in me, and I owed it to them to finish. Ideally, we're all working just to please ourselves and whatever. But in those dark moments, sometimes it's nice to sort of move the target to someone else. I want to please them. And if when that's done getting you through, you can move it back to like, oh, I'm actually just trying to serve myself. The other thing is readers. I paid people to read my book and find mistakes and point out gaffes and cultural sensitivities. So I had checkpoints in the real world where you're not just in the hamster wheel of your own creative process, quietly making a huge stinker. Check with other people, actually paid people. Oh, that's one too far. The other one, oh, go back. There we go. The other thing that was useful is inspiration. I call it here small, great moments. While you're working on this thing, every once in a while you'd be like, oh, that was a good one. You get this little thrill of excitement when like an idea lands or something kind of falls together, some pieces click into place. And those moments really counterbalance the certainty that sometimes happened that the book was trash and I was a hack. So that was really useful. So a little bit more of the specifics of my path to publication here. So this is an image of my studio in Toronto, which I have recently vacated very sadly, but I had it until very recently. With my first book, this is just like a little primer on how a comic book gets made. So any of you here who are here for comic stuff, this is a little chunk of that. Now, with comics, you start out with a script and thumbnails. So I drew and wrote my whole script together, meaning I did a rough draft of the pictures and words at the same time. I also did sketches and drawings of the places and people that would be in the background of different scenes, which you can see on the right there, that like board above my computer setup. Boom. So my thumbnail sketches, just if you're not familiar with the term, often a thumbnail is just like a very, very small drawing, thumbnail sized, that has like rough figures that sort of places things on your page. Because this was my first book and I was figuring out how I work best, my thumbnails were all over the map. You can see here, this image is on lined paper. I did it in pen, so there's no erasing. And when I changed my text, you can sort of see here that I just cut pieces of paper out, wrote on them, and then taped them down with Scotch tape. So this was like crafterino. This is crafternoon, not high tech. So this was how it started. And this is how that panel ended up looking in its finished iteration here. All my type was done on the publishing side. I made a font of my own handwriting and then they typeset it. So my finals don't have any words in them, which is hence the empty speech bubbles. In some cases, my thumbnails, I knew what I wanted to say, but I didn't know what I wanted to show. So I would just leave that blank rather than getting hung up on needing everything to be perfect before I move along. Everybody's process is different, but this is what worked for me at the time. And you can see here, this is what the final panel ended up looking like. In this case, like the editing process with comics is so strange because you're working with pictures and words. There's a hard script and you end up with these pieces of drawings here and there. So when you move things around, like everything shifts. But a lot of times things really morph through the process. In this case, these two panels were the bottom of a larger page and ended up being one page with just two panels alone in it. And some of them hardly changed at all. This one is almost identical from sketch to final, and that's the very first sketch. So every once in a while you luck out and the first thing that you do is like exactly what you want. And those are some of the small good moments that pull you through when you're doing 12 revisions on a different page. So once that process is done, the script and thumbnails have been submitted, I get edits back from my publisher. Then I go through and redo everything essentially. The making of a book is like make a book over and over completely like 4 or 5 times. It's very frustrating because I like to do things once and get it right, which doesn't work, simply doesn't. This is a picture of my manuscript after that first round of edits, which as it says, I did all by hand with Scotch tape and scissors. And as I also note, this is not the best way to do this. There are way better ways. I would not recommend. So at this point, I want to take everyone through I'm going to do it pretty quick here because I want to make sure there's lots of room for questions. Through one of the key moments in the book, I'm going to take it from its earliest iteration, this is the thumbnail, all the way to the published image and just show the process that it went through. Now, the frame that's up on the screen here is like one of the key moments in the book. The reason this moment is critical is in this scene, Shirley, the characters, if you're not familiar with the books, we've got Shirley Bones, aka Sherlock Holmes, wink, wink, and her sort of Watson in the form of this Jamila Wahid, her neighbor and eventual friend. So Shirley, in the style of Sherlock, it's not a direct anything, it's just a jumping off point, but her whole value is around being really smart and being basically right all the time. So in this scene, she's admitting she doesn't know everything and she's opening up that she and Jamila are friends, which is something she's never had before. So from here on out in the book, the two are equals. Now, my editors very smartly suggested that instead of burying this moment at the bottom of one page, we do what's called a splash page, where we just take that bottom panel and make it one whole page. The amount of information that you put on a comic page is one of the ways you control the pacing of the book. And by taking one whole page and doing a splash, you really force your audience to like slam on the emergency brake and look at that page. It's telling you that what happens on that page is important. So this was very good advice, great editing. So the next phase of what happened to this image is we go to pencils. That's when everything is basically approved. And now you do like a good rough draft of the whole book. You're redrawing the whole thing. And by now I was working digitally, thank goodness. So in this instance, this blue line that might show up a little bit vague on your screens is me roughing in the background. Now, another big piece of making books, especially comics, is world building. I can say I want Shirley and Jamila to be in Jamila's backyard, but now I have to decide what her backyard looks like, what it reflects and informs us about her family and her way of life. Are they rich? Are they poor? Do they have a junky backyard? Do they have a super manicured lawn? Do they even have a playground for the kids? Or is it just like, you know, a rose garden for a finicky parent? Like all of these little choices tell us so much more about what's going on. And when you've got this visual language ahead of you, you really have to make use of every aspect of it. So it can be a lot of pressure and a lot of decision making. That's one of the more exhausting parts, but it's also where you have all this fun and control. So after I got that rough idea in, I went in and did sort of the pencils of this. I put in a perspective grid to make sure that everything was where it should be and started to hack in like the hard details of what would be the final drawing here. This next image, if it shows, there it is, shows you what it looks like with the printing template that the printer gave me. So there's bleed and trim lines, and that sort of pink square that's the most in the center. That's where you want to make sure everything the most important is, because other than that, you're starting to get into the like dodgy area on the outside where like it might not be trimmed perfectly. So if you put information there, it might get cut off. Excuse me. Next up is inks, and that's like the good draft. Now we're going in with ink. I'm doing it digitally, but we're putting in like the final black line. This is the artwork that will go to print. So I worked in Photoshop, so I was able to put my background inks on their own layer, just in case I needed to move my characters around in front of it. It would mean I wouldn't have to redraw everything from scratch. And here, come on, tap, there we go, is the inked page completed. I do like to see the like pure black inks. It does look really nice. Now, at this point, I also was starting to run out of time. My first book was by no means done on deadline, which is not great, but also they do kind of account for that. And I needed to color it. And the best way to do that quickly was to bring in someone to do what's called flatting. So I hired a flatter. And I'll show you, the easiest way is to just show what flatting is. This is flatting essentially. It's having somebody go in and trace digitally all of the different shapes and just drop random colors in. That means that when it comes to my turn to color it, I just have to go in and essentially like paint bucket in the colors that I want. I don't have to spend all my time doing this tedious tracing. It's just jobbing out like the worst part of this. So it was very useful to have that done. And here's mostly correct colors. Looking nice. Now, when I'm presenting to kids, I like to show these two images just to show an example. I want to get to a few other things. Talking about the difference, some subtle differences in coloring. If you look at that tree color change in the background, your eye wants to go to the darkest and richest or most vibrant things in a page. And I realized that my eye was really going to that tree in the background when it was that kind of deep brick red. Whereas the most important stuff, there's no storytelling information there. I want people to go to Shirley's bright hair and Jamila's bright jersey and like the darkness of her hair, which is also an intensity. So once I made that a lighter color, the background fell back where it should be and the key characters jumped out like I wanted them to. Now with this, you don't always have time to do this much coloring finessing, especially if like me, you're doing everything. If you work with Marvel or whatever, there's somebody doing inks and pencils and colors and flats. You can all do the best of your job. But with me, I was doing everything myself. So by taking the extra time to put like these dappled light in, I'm also telling the audience and the readers, this is an important moment. This is a beautiful moment. This is one I want you to take a beat with. It would be great to have that much time to do the whole thing, but also, doesn't need to be done. I like to see what it looks like with the line layers turned off. It's another way to make sure your colors are looking balanced, and I was very happy with this. It's also just fun to see. And there's the final artwork. Boom, ready to go to print. Word bubble in, they'll put in the words. Bam. Now, here's how it began, the middle, and the end. It's nice to see them all together. I just think that's pleasing. Click. So comic complete, right? Almost complete. One of the other final fun steps is getting printers proofs. Now, this is a test run of the whole book from the printers. It's the right colors, the inks they're really going to use on the paper they're really going to use, and this is your last chance to check it for errors. So printers proofs aren't bound and made into a book. They're just like clipped together. They're loose pages. It's super fun to get these. This was a blast to look through. And it's like, this is when the excitement starts to build that like, you're going to have a physical book at some point. Like this is actually happening, which is pretty exciting. So this is my studio at the very beginning of the project. I like to show this just to be like, the artist's life is not glamorous. I, at the time, didn't have correct curtains. I was sharing the studio with like a zillion other people. This is in Toronto's Chinatown, and it had a tiny death-defying elevator and smelled like garbage juice all day long. And because I didn't have proper curtains, I would open up that umbrella and like hide behind it so I wasn't blinded when I looked at my computer. But like, it's gritty, but we had so much fun there. I miss that space all the time. And our most recent studio, which is a lot nicer and was like 7 times as much money. Exciting stuff. This is the studio when the whole book was done. And now my wall is looking like, one of those detective things with yarn all over it, where you're like connecting the dots and gently losing your mind. It's good stuff. A bunch of reference images everywhere, color tests, model drawings, everything. So all that to say, excuse me, that was how my book went from start to finish through all of these processes. Now, one of the big questions that people ask me, kids and adults alike, is how do you find inspiration? And that's going to be different for every one of us. But that quote that I mentioned at the beginning is a really good guide. And it's all about following the feeling of excitement. It's if something's uniquely interesting to you, let yourself look into it. If something feels a little extra sparkly to you, go towards it. It's the essence of being curious is going to crack open your creative world. Now, while you're exploring, some thoughts might crop up. If you encountered thoughts like, I'm wasting my time looking into this, this is pointless, I'm too busy for this, it could be actually a sign that you're very much on the right track. Or at least it's a sign that you, like most of us, have internalized a lot of really rough ideas around productivity and usefulness while ignoring the things that actually bring human beings joy. Playing, goofing around, having fun, acting silly, making each other laugh, going into that focus state where you're just noodling away at whatever you're doing with no awareness of the world. That's what you do naturally when you're a kid. And being creative is being open to all of the ideas and then following the one you actually like best, not the one that has like the best ROI or is the most marketable or is the most similar to what X does. And you like X, so you'll do that because it's familiar. In order to actually know which one you like best, you need to turn off a lot of the adult notions that we've just taken on, and you need to start goofing off more. Another thing is when you actually get to when the excitement of working is actually, or pardon me, when the excitement of like beginning and the excitement of finding your idea has actually given way to the hard work of the project, I also like to say that I refuel with fun. It's a big motivator for me, and that's my sustainer through the slog. But you'll find yours, whatever it is that kind of refuels the most fun, playful, energetic part of you, do that. If you're an introvert, it might be like, oh, I need to take like a 3-day no talking to anybody vacation where I just like read my favorite books or like sit and stare or garden or whatever. It doesn't have to be social. It is for me. But making it through my books has often been a hellish experience. And I definitely don't dwell on that when I present to kids. But in all of that, I used my personal fun outlets to get through it. I would go karaokeing or like even making a 30-minute coffee time with a pal in the midst of like a 16-hour day. Or, the drawing itself for me could often be a bit of a refuel. Lots of times it was brutal, but like I said before, when things click into place and you get that like real boost of doing something well, that in itself can be a refuel. But I just want to say that in the wake of the feeling of excitement that drives you, that will dip. It will not just dip, it will like the tank will empty and you'll be in the negatives sometimes. And that's when you need the friends, the mentors, the good moments, the support system to get you back into a place where you can actually work again. Let's see here. So yeah, with creative work, of course, we're forced to monetize it and to market it and to sell it. But the essence of creative work, or of finding fun and joy in any occupation that you're in, is the ability to make it fun and to play with it and to follow our interests in a way that is childlike. Let's see here. I'm gonna read from this incredibly wonderful book called Making Comics by Linda Barry. Now, it's like Linda Barry for me is the absolute pinnacle of a creative. Her work is so beautiful and interesting and edgy and weird and like gnarly and also incredibly accessible and funny. But she's just somebody who really lays her process incredibly bare. And I'm going to reference to a few of her books later. But what she says here is in the beginning, there wasn't drawing or writing as far as our 4-year-old hand was concerned. But at some point after, drawing splits off, and for the most people, it moves first to the margins and then vanishes from the page completely. Now, she said a little bit more, and it's well worth your read. This book, Making Comics, is fantastic. But the point, actually, I'll go back. Oh, sorry, I'm having things go wrong here. Come back. There we go. This is where I want to live. Even if you aren't an artist, if your creative work is elsewhere, this really gets down to how, as kids, we were very free to create without judgment of the outcome, without judgment from the outside world, without even our own judgment. We just did it because we felt like it. Like that was enough reason. I feel like doing this, so I'm gonna do it. And to work creatively as adults who have like downloaded the structures of a world that is actively killing a lot of people in real and in untangible ways daily, we have to work against our adult instincts and reconnect to our childhood ones. Doing this within our current system is very difficult because in the end, we do have to monetize and market and sell. But if we're lucky and if we're careful, we can do our best to protect our creative process from the system around it until it's absolutely necessary to bring our creations into the world. And as I've said, that doesn't mean keeping them a secret. We have our trusted friends, we have our trusted creative team that we can bring our work to and get the feedback that we need before we have to subject the work to the world. But the idea of just doing this because we feel like it, that's the thing I want to leave you all with in terms of like an answer to a potential question of like, how do I be inspired? Or like, what ideas should I do next? Do the one you feel like. And if that decision making is too hard, pull yourself back, goof around a little bit, do something silly or very stupid, and try to bring yourself back to a more childlike state so that the pressures of having to get a return on investment for your creativity cease to exist. You can't, return on investment is something that the creative field will never deliver on. The amount of work that goes into making something so simple or so small or a book you can read in half an hour, it's mind-boggling. But the fact that people continue to do it and the fact we continue to seek it tells you that that in itself has merit. So all that to say, here are a few amazing books that would guide you in rerouting some of these thoughts. There's a million more, but these are some that I've really enjoyed. And I know there's 1,000 out there, and maybe people want to sound off in the chat, like you say, about books that you've really loved that were exciting and thrilling. And with all of that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen or maybe I'll leave it up if you want to write down these books, but I'm happy to take questions and provide answers as best I can at this time. Boom, boom, shake the room. And I'm looking at the chat actively, Steve, so you don't have to worry about managing it. But please throw your questions, comments, and concerns into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them.
Or if need be, and the folks are more inclined to do the speaking and communicate that way, if you want to just
Oh,
raise
yeah.
your, we can do it that way too. There's a decent amount of folks, but not a full ton. So if you want, you can do it that way. I'll get the ball rolling. Like, can you talk, Gillian, a little bit about I know something that myself and a lot of folks have with when it comes to writing and whatnot is writer's block, and like any sort of strategies in terms of combating that.
I mean, it's an ironic question because working on my third book right now, and I'm having a terrible time with it. So, you know, I'm happy to be forthright about that because it's not an easy thing. For me, I hit snags around decision making, and I had a first draft that was great, and then I got a bunch of very fair and reasonable notes from my editor, but it meant now I have to like move everything around again. And suddenly I'm like, well, how do I do that? And am I losing the story if I do it? And how do I even keep track of all this information? I think one way to help with any sort of blockages, don't judge yourself about them. Sometimes things just take a long time. And another one is to have more than one project on the go can be helpful for me, where I can just like, instead of being so worried that I'm not working on project A, I'm just like pivoting and working on project B that might just be a personal project for fun. It might be something for work, but something that's a little bit more cut and dried. Another thing that's super helpful is, if you're particularly writer's block, read a ton of stuff. I read a lot of graphic novels to see what other people are doing. I try to read as many books as I can just so that you're constantly taking in these forms. And you don't want to imitate what you're reading, but you are synthesizing things, and you're also like, oh yeah, books can exist. When I was working on my first book, actually, I had a lot of graphic novels around me, but there was certain people who I couldn't look at because they were too good. So I personally, some people might be challenged by like, oh, this is so much better than I could ever do, and I'm going to strive to it. Perfectly valid. But for me, I needed to only look at stuff that I felt like I was equal to or better than, which, is there ego involved? Of course there is. But, it's if I looked at a book that I'm like, oh, I can do better than this, or here's what I'd change, that helped me feel like, this person who I have notes for, egomaniacal though they may be, they have a book published, so I can do that. Like it was just for me, and I'm not gonna drag anybody or say who it was that I thought I was better than, but like those little moments can kind of help trick the ego to get it working again, because it can be very challenging.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Um, Anybody else? Everyone's a little shy today, I guess. How about
But I covered everything so thoroughly. There's not one question left to be asked.
because you nailed it so
Yeah,
well.
that's why. What were you gonna say?
I was gonna say maybe speaking a little bit more on managing deadlines.
Really asking all the questions that are my weaknesses, but sorry, go on. You had something else.
Well, just sort of strategies in terms of that, because I know that that can kind of be creative-minded folks, right? We are a little bit we can be a little scatterbrained in that. That's not necessarily in our personality, but do you have any sort of advice or recommendations in terms of trying to manage that aspect of things?
Yeah, I think for me, I personally find like a long project. In many ways, graphic novels are absolutely not suited to the way that I like to work. Um, because I prefer like a short thing that I can get done in an intense burst and then have it be done. Whereas this is like very much a marathon and not a sprint. So what I found helpful was making like, I mean, it's just rudimentary organization, but I made daily page goals and weekly page goals. So I'd have my daily page goals were like a hope for, but the weekly was better in a way because sometimes a day is just not a good day and another day is like yes, like a takeoff day. So rather than beating myself up for the days that I didn't make, the weekly goal was actually the more important thing. And as long as I made that weekly page count, that was really good for me. And then I'd have a monthly and so on. And I just, essentially make a work back on my own schedule to make sure that I got the pages done when I needed to. I see a questions come in here. What's your relationship to posting slash sharing, so sharing work in progress or finished on social media? That's a fantastic question that gets more complicated by the day. Um, I think historically, sharing things on social media is really lovely for a bunch of reasons. It's a great way to build an audience. It's a great way to keep like people who are already invested in your work interested. Like I love to look at behind the scenes drawings, work in progress from artists that I admire and follow. So, it stands to reason that people would be interested in what I'm doing. So I try to post that. But lately, I have been seeing, and an artist I really admire, posted a thing about how she's taking all of her work off of social media because a bunch of the AI business is going to be, I'm pretty sure like the metaverse is going to be able to scrub your social media to educate their AI, which, people have a lot of thoughts on AI, but at the core of it, it's plagiarism software. It's stealing from existing artists, not crediting anything, and then making an uncredited remix for no money, benefiting no one, and putting out something that is easy and convenient while literally ripping off the entire history of artists working. I'm a hard no on AI, even though it's now officially a part of every part of our life. I think we're so not critical enough of this thing that we're just allowing to penetrate everything. It's bonkers. But anyway, since that Google AI thing happened and now they're telling people to mix glue into their pizza sauce and having pregnant ladies smoke 8 cigarettes or whatever, I think people are maybe waking up to the fact that it's an aggregator. It's not facts. It's not an oracle. So I don't know. I think that until some of that AI stuff gets worked out, I'm feeling pretty trepidatious about posting my work online because it is something that can be ripped off and stolen and taken and no credit goes to me. And artists are already like the least paid. So like, I don't know why I want to contribute to that, but it's really disappointing. I got a lot out of Twitter back in the day. I got a lot out of Instagram back in the day. And these platforms are becoming more and more cannibalistic in a way that I'm not sure how to deal with. So in answer to your question, I don't know. It's a real conundrum.
It is terrifying, no doubt.
Yes. Oh, thank you. A nice comment from Debbie. Also, thank you, Colleen. I'm guessing on the spelling, but that's my educated guess. Um, Thanks so much, Debbie. I appreciate it. I feel like have been a bit of a late bloomer to my own career, so it's a little, I'll take all the validation I can get. This is also a thing. If anybody's out there like, it's too late for me to get started on any sort of thing. I mean, I didn't go back to school for art until I was 30, and I'm now well into my 40s and didn't publish. I think the first book published when I was maybe 40, 39 or 40. Anyway, it's all to a lot of people that might still seem young, but there's a lot of young creators coming up, and we see so many people who are like 22 and have 7 Oscars or whatever. It's just like there's a lot of time, there's a lot of ages in which you can make work, and there's literally no limit on it. And some really fascinating artists get started later in life. So I also think you sort of inoculate yourself from being over influenced by outside sources by starting later. You have all this life experience built up, and then you put out something and it's very you because you haven't been like, I don't know. I think younger people are often very pushed into production by outside forces. Anyway, that's a sidebar.
Okay, is there any more questions from the group? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Okay, so once again, big thank you, and I'm going to heap a little bit more validation on you. Thank you so much. You're ridiculously talented and inspiring and all that jazz. And on top of it, you're just a very swell person, and I thank you very much for being a part of this. Everyone, jazz hands or snaps for Jillian. And thank you to all of you for participating in our artwork professional development session. Everyone that's been registered for this, I will be sending out a link so you can watch if you maybe came in a little bit late, and you can watch it at your own leisure whenever you like. And go check out those other talks that we have on YouTube and also on artslethbridge.org. And once again, if you haven't yet already, please sign up and become a member. We want to be your friend. We want to help you out. So please do that. Join the Allied Arts Council. Thank you, everyone, so much. And one final time, thank you so much, Jillian.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me, and thanks to everyone who came out and your lovely questions and your lovely time. Thanks again.
Cheers, everyone. Have a great night.